It was right here on Morning Express. I'll quickly reintroduce the guests that we have. We have David Osiani. We're joined by Ruth Ambogo. We have Philip Magal. And last but not least, Mark Bichachi. Just to look at the things that have transpired this week. And maybe let me start with what is most current and what is on the standard this morning on the headline. MCAs win big in governor's push for change of law. Now there is what they're calling Ugatuzi Initiative. And this is the governors coming up with amendments to the Constitution, which I would just like to hear what your take is. Let me start with the lawyers. I'll start with Philip Magal to hear what your take is on this.
My quick take is that this is another name for the BBI initiative, okay? Or another front on which the BBI initiative is being pushed
What makes you
through.
think it's more or less?
It is because the proposals are one and the same.
How do you know the proposals of BBI? Have you written the report yourself?
You know,
I'm getting tired of people assuming they know what is in BBI. No, you're lying to Kenyans.
At the end of the day, even if you say people are assuming, the politicians are already giving us...
let me respond.
Even those politicians are people, and it's based on assumptions. Can we just wait to see the report?
Yeah.
If it looks like a duck,
What have you seen it looks like?
It is a
it
duck.
is
What
a
have
duck.
you seen it looks like?
We've seen what Raila is saying about BBI. We've seen what Uhuru is saying about BBI. And these are the people who constituted this team. What do you expect it to do? This is their instrument. They are working at their behest. So, I mean, it is a no-brainer. You don't need to be a rocket scientist.
There are a few differences between this and the BBI from what we've had, Mark.
And now, just to buttress my point, if you look at this picture, this again is the face of Uhuru and Raila. Okay?
How is this the face of Uhuru and Raila?
We have Oparanya there, we have Kiraitu there, and all the rest of them.
Fuda Kibwana is a man who seems to stand on his own.
So basically you're saying that these governors have no independent thought.
Basically what I'm saying, these people are proposing a premiership position with 2 deputies and a presidency with a deputy, and 45% allocation to the county government. I mean, is this something new? It's nothing new.
Okay, Mark, since you seem to think we're jumping the gun by maybe trying to think and analyze what the BBI may give us once it's out.
Listen, the proof of the pudding is in its eating. Not sitting in the living room while it's being baked and imagining, I can smell vanilla.
And
so
by the way, that's in an ideal world.
Yes.
This is Kenya.
No, the truth of the matter is this, okay? And I keep telling Kenyans the same thing over and over again. The BBI had 9 points. 9. Those 9 points are what it needs to address, not even in a referendum, in a report. They are not supposed to come up with the bills after BBI. They're supposed to tell us these 9 points upon which 2 leaders sat down and agreed upon what are they delivering on. That's how we judge BBI. Because that's what was agreed upon. That's what we gave a budget to. Even these parliamentarians who are complaining, they passed a budget within which there was BBI, and in that BBI, they knew exactly what is there. The reason why BBI is being so hardly fought is not because of its merits and demerits. Let's not lie to Kenyans. It is because of protecting the interests of certain individuals in 2022. Because they imagine that if their competitor is able to unite the country, then they stand a less chance of winning. They imagine if corruption is dealt with, then on what platform will they stand? That is the problem with BBI, because there is no other document they have seen. They can only speculate around 2022.
But given that let me call them the initiators of BBI, that being Raila Odinga and the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, have already pronounced, particularly Raila, what he's expecting out of the BBI. Doesn't that give us an indication of what maybe is expected there? I mean, in an ideal world, Mark, it is true. Yes, it is true that the BBI...
that will be true if Raila is writing the report. That would be very true. But the report was not supposed to be written that way.
It's not
and if that report comes out and it has Raila's views and not Kenya's views, I'll be the first one to complain. You understand?
So what you're saying is that let's wait for the BBI report.
Yes, because Raila, like anyone else, has the right to say what he wants in it. Number two, on this Ugatuzi initiative, let me just tell Kenyans a few things. These governors are not copying the footsteps of BBI. They're actually following the footsteps of Punguza Mzigo. And what is the footstep of Punguza Mzigo? Offering car grants and loans to MCAs so that they can endorse the bill.
Yeah.
And this is a Punguza Mzigo copy-paste initiative. You understand? Where you create something where an MCA looks at this, instead of seeing what it means for this country, what they see is what it means for them. All they're seeing is a car and things like that. And that's the problem. You cannot keep doing bills to please the people who are passing the bills. You need to do bills on the purpose of the sole agenda that you're trying to drive. What they're trying to drive, by the way, this is how constitutional amendments are usually done in a normal society, but Kenya is not normal. If you go to the Second Amendment in the United States, it addresses one issue. The Fifth Amendment addresses one issue. It is only here in Kenya where what they really want is 45%. That's what they really want.
That's the bottom line.
So the Prime Minister and whatever is to appease the powers that be. And then the car grants and whatever is to do MCAs. Instead of having the country discuss one issue. Do we need 45% for Ugatuzi or not?
All right, let me hear from David Osiani. I'll come to you, Ruth, in just a bit. But your thoughts on that, that's being Ugatuzi initiative by the governors?
Now, a quick scan of this, because it hasn't been drafted yet, but I know that they are gifted with one of the best constitutional lawyers in the country, Professor Kivutha Kibwana. A quick scan, apart from the problems with the freebies that they want to give the MCAs, you cannot entrust in the MCA's hands the equalization fund. It is fine to give them the ward allocation funds. In fact, I am a big proponent for devolving management of resources to the ward level, because that's where the rubber meets the road. But to give them the equalization fund, it will be abused. There will be no way of holding them to account. If the national, National Government Affirmative Action Fund itself, we can't even know what it does and how it does it. The proposal to have 2% of the revenue of the country go to the judiciary is a wonderful proposal. It will strengthen the judiciary. The proposal here to have 5% of the county allocation set aside for youth and women is a fantastic proposal. They, however, do not tell us how they will arrive at the head of state and the prime minister, who among the two will go for elections. Is it the Ethiopian case where we have the prime minister running for election, and how will the election be done? Because then the prime minister appoints the head of state. Or are they saying the president will run with the prime minister as one ticket? Those are things we will have to look at and see how it works. They propose the reintroduction of assistant ministers, which is almost laughable for people who are saying that they don't want to expand and they want to save resources. But it's not an entirely bad thing. They propose that at least 2/3 of the cabinet will come from parliament and 1/3 will be from outside parliament, which of course you and I know has ended up usually being politicians still outside parliament. I hope that even as they do that, there will be a way in which we end up with professionals and people who have technical understanding of the ministries, so that we don't end up with jokes in the different cabinet slots. So in the whole, and a quick look at this, up to and including the proposal of devolution of 45% of the national budget to the counties, it's not all too bad in my estimation. They say every county must have at least one of these: a cabinet secretary, a deputy, an assistant minister, or a principal secretary. Every county must be endowed with at least one of those. I think in a bit, the sense in which they are trying to operate is that they want an inclusive government where every part of the country feels it has been co-opted in the governance structure of the country. So a quick look at it, not too bad. It cannot be perfect. Of course, MCAs, if you are going to pass it, it's a political process. even if BBI were to end up eventually into a referendum, I agree with Mark to the extent that we do not know what BBI thinks. We cannot now say that we want to predict what they are going to do or preempt. But even if BBI were to eventually end up in a situation where they need a referendum, because they want more than half of the counties to have passed it, which is 24, you will have to play politics. And the MCAs are quite a political lot. I'm being modest. So you have to give and take for you to get to where you want to be. There's a bit that you will have to, there's a way you'll have to entice the MCAs.
All right, Ruth Ambogo, to hear your remarks on this.
My view is that a referendum is one of those ways the Constitution gives the citizens power to directly exercise their sovereign, basically the sovereign power granted by the Constitution. So it is, of course, directly as well as through the elected representatives, because this has to go through county governments before now, being as citizens being allowed to take a popular vote on the same. So we should not be fighting ideas based on who has fronted them. If we begin the discussion from, oh, you know, the Council of Governors are now pushing the BBI agenda. If we begin having discussions from that, and remember when Punguza Mzigo initiative came up, the first point of attack on Punguza Mzigo was, this is a Ruto-sponsored bill. So when we start attacking all these ideas based on who has sponsored the idea, then we are going to miss the point. I agree with Osiani that we should focus on what is the content of some of these proposals that they are pushing forward. And looking at the Ugatuzi initiative, besides the political mobilization they have to do, which is, of course, enticing MCAs, which I also do not agree with, besides that, and maybe in their view and according to how their politics is played, they really indeed have to do that to get their agenda passed by. I would laud some of the recommendations they are putting forth. Number one, for instance, the 45% allocation of the national share of revenue to county governments. I am a great proponent of this because I've always argued and said that, you see, devolution came with a devolution of services to the county governments. And as it stands right now, the county governments are taking a huge share of the roles and functions that were previously being carried out by the national government. So it doesn't make sense to allocate, as it stands right now, is it 15% of the national revenue to the national government when 90% of the services and I mean the delivery of services has been allocated to county government. So I am for the push of having 45% of that amount allocated to county governments. Okay. Now, the other thing that I would like to basically appreciate that this initiative is trying to push for is the two-third gender rule. I have not seen in any of the current propositions that have been put forth any proposal on how to ensure there is inclusivity of not just women, but women, youth, and persons with disabilities in appointments. And I've seen they have rightfully addressed that. One of the things that I faulted the Punguza Mzigo initiative for was taking us back to the era of further marginalization of groups that have been previously marginalized. Basically taking away, doing away with the purpose of the Constitution, one of the great purposes of the Constitution, which was to rectify previous and past injustice that came up as a result of marginalization and exclusivity of certain groups from leadership and decision-making spaces. So seeing Ugatuzi initiative pushing for the two-third gender rule is a great win for us. And if they go ahead...
the two-thirds gender rule has existed.
Exactly.
So there's a problem with whether we will eventually implement
exactly.
it.
And the bill and the Ugatuzi initiative is actually trying to come up with measures of how the same will be achieved. I hope to see and hear from them how the specifics of how they intend to achieve this two-third gender rule. Of course, they have mentioned yesterday that this is just a blanket proposition. Okay. They are going to give us the entire document as we wait for BBI. And by the way, I think Kenyans should understand that anybody can come up with an initiative. Even the four of us here can decide to give a proposition.
I think as Kenyans, we need to understand what are we fixing.
Exactly.
Because at the end of the day, if we don't know what we're fixing, we're going to have all these proposals. And the next thing is that we'll have this panel that comes on Friday say we also have a proposal to amend.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yes.
And we should do that, by the way.
Yes. And we also need car grants so that we can come here All those in favor say aye. I already have 4 votes.
But maybe not to lose that point, what exactly do we need to fix in Kenya? I'll give that to you, Philip, as we wind up on that and move on to something else.
That is the starting point. What is wrong with our constitution?
Yes.
Yeah.
If you speak to any foreigner who, with some expertise in legal knowledge who visit this country, they'll tell you we have the best constitution in the world. What is the problem? The judiciary came out in their proposals to the BBI and told them off, told them we have all the laws we need. The implementation is the problem. It is the same message that Katiba Institute put out clearly to the BBI initiative. But BBI initiative apologists will want you to believe otherwise. They want to act like they have some magical card beneath their sleeves, yet we know what it is. They want to create more positions. Not that I have a problem with it. The problem with our constitutions are very few, and in my estimation, the first one, of course, is the imperial presidency. There's too much power resides with the presidency, and that is why I would support the split between the head of state and head of government, so that these two can be able to counter each other.
David Osiani, do you agree that our constitution is by far a very good constitution, and therefore what we are trying to fix from the political point of view is sometimes skewed?
No, I totally agree with that. You see, the problem we have in this country is that we do not want to honor the spirit. It's the spirit of the Constitution that we do not want to uphold. All right? The intention of the Constitution as a paper, it is wonderful. The container and the content, fantastic. But you have a country where laws are put and not obeyed. To date, I will ask you, the president, there is a law that all government parastatals, for example, should allocate 30% of the procurement funds
To the youth.
to the youth, women, and persons with disabilities. I guarantee you, I don't think there is a single parastatal, maybe apart from the affirmative action, of outfits, youth fund and women fund, that would. There wouldn't be a single that does that. You have a president that says, SMEs have not been paid. I want them paid within the next 3 weeks. And I can guarantee you that you will find that has not even been followed. So we have laws, but do we have humans who really want to uphold the law?
So maybe
do
what
we
need to
even
fix is
obey
humans, not the
the
Constitution.
Chapter 6 of the Constitution on leadership and integrity? If we stood by that Chapter 6 alone, we would not see the mediocre leadership that we have in some of our people, so-called leaders. They would, from the word go, be out and leave the field for people who are capable.
All right, and that sets the stage for the next thing I'd like us to talk about, and this was the cancellation of the Kimwarer Dam.
Before we talk about the Kimwarer Dam, I think that question on what problem
do we need to fix?
Yeah, what problem do we need to fix, and does it really need a constitutional amendment or a referendum to have that problem fixed? I think the key problems that we are facing as a country is weak institutions. If we did have or strengthened the current institutions that we do have, we would not need to have
Are they really weak institutions or weak individuals? That
weak institutions are contributed or rather developed by weak leadership within this kind of institutions. So when I say weak institutions, what we need to do is strengthen our institutions, have the right leaders at the helm of these institutions.
That's it.
Leaders who are picked on the basis of meritocracy rather than political alignments, political statements, and tribal alignments.
Look at DCI.
Second,
Look at the difference between then and now. Look at DPP's office. Look at the difference
between then and now.
One may
It's
argue
purely
that this
leadership.
is all drama and brouhaha, but I tell you, there is difference when the leadership is right.
Different.
Okay.
And
The
let me just
difference
continue. The other issue that needs fixing in this country, because most of the initiatives are addressing resource allocation, what percentages we should get, simply fight corruption. The moment you fight corruption, we will not even be having a debate of whether county governments should be getting 45% or 15%. County governments will be able to sustain themselves with the 15% that they do have, because they can account for the funds that they have been allocated. They can use the accounts they have been the funds that they have been allocated efficiently and sufficiently and deliver their functions without necessarily needing more money. Third, the other thing that needs to be solved in this country that doesn't even need a constitutional amendment is enhancing constitutionalism and the rule of law. Most of the challenges and problems we are facing right now power wrangles and struggles that now we are trying to solve through the constitution are issues that can be fixed by just obeying and, entrenching
Sticking to the law.
constitutionalism. For instance, the biggest challenge we are having with power struggles between Senate and National Assembly or county governments and the national government are contributed by the pure disregard of court orders and court rulings, because we have a judiciary whose role is to interpret the law. The judiciary interprets the law, but we have institutions or arms of government that are not willing to follow court orders. We would not be going to a referendum to fix some of these questions if we only followed the rule of law. And finally, inclusivity will be solved, especially at the electoral and even appointive seats, can be solved by merely strengthening the election system and IEBC, ensuring that there are free and fair elections. If we did have free and fair elections, we would not have the need for having a prime minister and 2 deputy prime ministers, just so that we can have a tribal balance within the democratic and the leadership space. All we would do is hold credible and free and fair elections, and the country would say, indeed, this is the person who has been validly elected as president, and we don't need another prime minister from an opposing tribe and 2 deputy prime ministers from 2 other tribes to balance out and make the country peaceful.
Well captured. I want us now to move on to the Kimorer Dam, and I'll request that we keep the main thing here. By that, what I mean is there are reasons why the Kimorer Dam was cancelled by the president, but we've also had politicians, some of them, come out and sort of try to fight that. And I'll read a statement that was sent out by Honorable Kipchumba Murkomen, and he says that the people of Elgeyo Marakwet have been denied their rightful share of national projects in a deliberate act of discrimination. He continues to say that I urge the president to constitute a transparent team, and accused the team, the technical team that had been put together, of being not ethnically balanced, and therefore he wants one that is ethnically profiled and some regions removed from discrimination. But let me start with, first of all, Mark Bichachi, you're in agreement? Are you in agreement with the president actually cancelling that whole thing? Despite the fact that 4 billion has already been sunk in, there is likely to be money that will be paid for lack of honoring the contract.
If you get into your house today after the show and you find a thief in your living room and he's busy taking your TV, and then when you catch him, you tell him, listen, the reason I came into your house was to steal everything. So I'm halfway through. Please allow me to finish stealing so that now afterwards you can begin the process of prosecuting me properly. We have caught a thief in the middle of robbing, pillaging our country. And Murkomen and his ilk want us to believe that the best thing we can do is we've given them 4 billion shillings and they bought towels. And they bought pickups which were perambulating Eldoret town, ferrying people who don't even work for the company. And he wants us to believe that somehow as a country, the best thing we can do is give a company that has declared itself bankrupt, more money to do a lot more nothing. Murkomen, please tell me, out of 4 billion shillings, how much have the people of Kerio Valley benefited already? How much can they say this is what 4 billion shillings has done? Then the last question I would like to ask my dear brother, tell me, what does communal inclusivity have to do with the technical capacity? Is Kalenjin mathematics, dear brother, different from Luya mathematics?
Mathematics.
When you hesabu people in Luya land, you say Ndala Chibili. Is it different from 1, 2, 3? Is it trying to say that the conclusion that these people were bankrupt would change if a Kalenjin was there? Would the conclusion that this money was thrown badly, would it change if we put a Luo there? No, come on. You do not suddenly become a professional in dams just because you have the right tribe. Lastly, this idea that people represent only a small village. No. The National Assembly has to consider, Parliament rather, has to consider national interests first. So you cannot say that the people of Kerio Valley are being disenfranchised. The rest of us who paid taxes, where is our 4 billion? It was our money that was stolen.
Okay.
So don't tell me that you're specially injured
That's a very good
because you come from Kerio Valley.
All right, evidently-
Let me tell you, shame on you. In fact, let me just say this publicly. If you write such a statement to the head of state and you are the purported leader of government business, the head of state should expect a resignation by end of day.
All right, Mark Bichachi has definitely put his thoughts across. David Osiani trying to keep the main thing. I think that sounded more like an attack on Murkomen.
I based it
maybe
on
his
fact.
idea, on
I
fact.
did not talk about his person.
all
I
right.
talked about his person.
Okay.
No. Let me first say this. You know, it is shameful to speak from both sides of the cheek.
Yes.
On one hand, Murkomen now causes problem with the composition of the team that gave this report.
And maybe just for the benefit of somebody who might not know what that team was, there was quantity surveyor Julius Matu, the PS infrastructure Professor Paul Maringa, and engineer Benjamin Mwangi.
Good. He has an issue with it, and rightly so. All right? Let's first agree on the basics that we need inclusivity in this country. But on the other hand, Murkomen is the one fighting the attempt by BBI to try and end up with inclusivity. They are the greatest fighters against the handshake, which tries to sort out, amongst other things, such issues as he raises, that we need ethnic balance and ethnic inclusivity. So where do you stand? Anyway, that said, the cancellation of Aurora Kimwarer, 22 billion that would have been lost, is probably the greatest actions of the president. We are tired of attempts to try and curb corruption, only to end up paying anyway. The decision by the president to stop forthwith the investment of money where it has now been apparent and obvious that the money would be lost because the first bit of the money intended for that project have ended up in private pockets with a company that is delisted in many Commonwealth countries, which from the outset should not have been engaged in this matter in Kenya. On that basis alone, the president has done the people of Elgeyo Marakwet greater good. Questions were asked that are obvious by environmentalists. How do you build a dam basing it on a seasonal river? Dams should have all-season rivers. Now, if you have a dam which is supplied by rivers that dry today and are not dry tomorrow, and then now you want to tell us we have to spend money on electricity for the entire life of that dam, pumping water into that dam, you are lying to Kenyans. We need to agree on fundamental issues. Do not politicize it. But what I would expect to happen even more is if it's going to be the issue of we are now being sidelined as the people of Elgeyo Marakwet because this has been cancelled, I want the president to order for projects in Elgeyo Marakwet with that same amount and supervise them himself to show them the difference between wastage and theft and taking care of the interest of our people.
Of the people.
There has to be a way in which leaders become leaders and not politicians. I expect Murkomen, the son of an AIC reverend, brought up in the Bible, I expect more of him than to just politicize issues and not see sin for what it is. This country, more than ever, needs men and women who will neither be bought nor sold, who will call truth by its name.
By its name. Ruth Ambogo?
One of the principles of budgeting is that planning should precede funding. That before you fund a project, before you decide we are allocating this amount of money, you should have done thorough, proper planning for that particular project. And one of the ways of planning for a project would be studying and understanding best practices that have been adopted by people who have, simple feasibility studies. And sometimes just doing a study of people who have implemented the particular projects that you want to implement and how they did it. Going and understanding how a country that once had water conservation problems have managed to successfully solve that problem. One of my biggest concerns is that who lied to Kenyans that the best way to conserve water has to be through dams, through the building of dams? Is that the best practice that we can find out there? And even if it is indeed the best practice, the only way to conserve water, haven't other places or even other countries been able to build up dams at lower costs and dams that have been able to, withstand the test of time? A good example is given of a dam that had been funded by this particular government in Kajiado County. A lot of money spent on it, over 1 billion shillings, I cannot get the exact figure, spent on building this particular dam, only for the place to end up being an unviable ground in the first place to even construct that dam to begin with. So therefore, over 1 billion shillings that could have been put into other projects to conserve water has been wasted. And there's nothing that is being done about it. In fact, I am made to understand that that particular dam is now a dumping site. Now, when the government comes and backtracks and says this particular project is not technically and financially viable, one would question who sat on the planning committee of deciding that this particular project should be done. Which experts were involved in deciding that, this project is technically viable? Is it that we simply come up with solutions and say, okay, now we need 10 stadiums. We don't care where the stadiums are going to be, the stadia are going to be built. We don't care whether that piece of land, that's why they haven't been built. We don't care whether that terrain is even proper for the building of a stadium. We don't care whether it is on a valley and when it rains, it shall be flooded. We just want to deliver a promise to the people. When we are delivering promises to the people, and I think this is why the cost of governance is in Kenya.
It's not even about delivering promises. It's about interest, personal interest, and how much money people can make.
And for me, that is where now I'm bringing my focus, that when we are in the quest to deliver promises, because these are some of the promises we have given our electorate, in the quest to deliver promises, are we thinking of long-term solutions that even when I am gone, this particular project that I am putting up shall withstand the test of time? And people would come and say that, in my reign or in my tenure as a president or as a permanent secretary or a cabinet secretary for treasury and even for agriculture and planning or devolution, that I successfully put up these particular programs and projects that have been there 60 years after my death, 20 years after I have left office. Are we really concerned about legacy, or is it a quick microwave solutions that end up proving not technically or financially viable?
All right, and I want to bring in Philip. And Philip, as we wind up on this, the question here, of course, for many Kenyans would be, given what the technical report put on the table and why the president has cancelled that particular project, for instance, simple feasibility study. The fact that the cost was more than double what it should be. Simple things that one then would question if there was a technical committee that sat before this was approved. If there was anybody that sat down and said, okay, this is what we're going to do, even in terms of environment. The question is then, shouldn't we already have people who are doing time for this? Shouldn't we already have people that we can say, pinpoint and say, number 1, 2, 3, 4, you should already be in prison as we are talking right now?
First of all, let me support Murkomen.
Support Murkomen?
Yes. Our people, my tribe was not included in that. There was no Pokot.
I know you're the master of sarcasm. I didn't see that one coming. But
there was no Pokot in that technical committee.
That's actually a very good point.
That said, of course, we know who the advocate to the people who've been arraigned for the theft of the funds in Arora and Kimwerere is. We saw who appeared there and who was loudest of the advocates. I am surprised that the president would, after the theft of these monies, still be gracious enough to still give these people a second chance and build a road for them. From the word go, it is clear that Aror and Kimwerere were never meant to be implemented in the first place. This was a theft scheme, an Ocean 11 kind of grand theft scheme, where people, without even doing feasibility studies, allocated funds and took all the money and left the people of Elgeyo high and dry. Now that the president, in his grace, has said, we've done feasibility study and Kimwerere is not feasible, which would make a lot of sense. Why would you have two major dams in one county? I mean, the budgetary allocation under Division of Revenue Bills to Elgeyo Marakwet is only it is the lowest. It's 3.25 billion. Yet these people had an allocation of over 40 billion for 2 dams. For heaven's sake, I come from West Pokot, which is semi-arid, and we don't even have a single dam. We don't have a single dam. We have one that is stalled. The contractor says it's not been paid for the last 3 years. Yet this county had 2 which had never been, where feasibility studies had never been conducted.
But then going back to the question, Philip,
Yes.
and from a legal perspective, shouldn't we already have people arrested as we speak?
Yes.
Because
Yes,
really,
people have been arrested.
And-
the CS Finance has been sacked.
Yeah.
The PS Finance has been sacked. They've both been arraigned in court. But then for you to be able to understand the cocktail of interest in this particular case, you have to ask yourself, who is the advocate? And that is where I started. It's Murkomen. Yet he's the one who again goes to the ground and says that we are being denied resources. How do you defend the people who've stolen, who have allegedly stolen from your people, and then go back to your people and tell them that it is the head of state who is discriminating against us?
okay, so I guess
know,
we're all in agreement that...
I think I would like to agree with you that, and also extend the point that liability should be extended beyond just the cabinet secretary and the permanent secretary. Because what would end up happening is that you'd find the same technical committee that sat to approve these projects will still be the same committee that will come and recheck the project and tell you, oh, it is not viable anymore. What changed in between? So liability should extend beyond just the permanent secretary, the cabinet secretary, to the people who actually approve these projects and give it a go-ahead.
Absolutely, and we'll be waiting to see on that. I want us to get into our last topic this morning, and that is also on the Standard this morning. Commander backs ODM candidate for Kibra seat. But this, of course, is in light, if we use the lens that many were using, that MacDonald Mariga was a project of the deputy president. It looks like the president has changed that narrative by symbolically placing the Jubilee cap on MacDonald Mariga. So that has left many wondering. But at the end of the day, there are those who also, there are pundits, who are saying that this might actually jeopardize the handshake. I don't know how light the foundation for the handshake was, if this is going to jeopardize it, but let me hear your, and we put our closing remarks as we do that. Mark Bichachi, I'll start with you.
First, the handshake was not premised on non-competition. To say that ODM cannot compete with Jubilee is to betray the very fundamentals of democracy in this country.
And very simplistic.
Yes, and it's very simplistic. And if that's how fickle the handshake is, then I don't want it as well. Because I honestly believe that the handshake was built on creating an environment where political competition would happen peacefully. And that is why we lauded it when you saw 2 rival convoys, one with Sifuna and the other with Mariga's convoy, greeting each other and fist bumping each other. That is the spirit of the handshake. The handshake was not and should not be a political tool for disenfranchising democracy.
Correct.
That said, I think one of the things that we as a country need to do is we need to really quickly figure out what is the main thing. The main thing for Kibra is not for Jubilee to win or ODM to win or whatever. It's for them to get a legislator who is better or at least equal to Ken Okoth. That is the win that we are looking for. Winning is not finding out whether Tangatanga Kieleweke made inroads. It is not finding out whether ODM, that is still its stronghold. Winning is whether the people of Kibra will get what they wanted.
All right.
And lastly, I hope that Kenyans will finally realize that representation is not that Mariga is a Luya. That should not be what representation is. Representation should be that my problems, my issues are being addressed regardless of my tribe. That should be what people are focusing on. Anything less than that, you will have a winner at the poll, and then all of Kibra has lost.
All right, Philip Magal, your closing comments and just weighing in on that.
I would like to reiterate what Mark has just said. You know, Kibera people should focus on getting themselves a proper representative. It's not about ODM, it's not about URP or Jubilee. It is not about Raila, it's not about William Ruto. It's about the people of Kibera and their needs. On the president's endorsement of Mariga, you know, ODM people are so worried about this. I've been speaking to some of them, and what I would like to tell you people is that even without the president's endorsement, you lost Embakasi South. You lost in Kisumu as well. So I think the president should also save face. Instead of giving you a through pass, and then you hit the ball over the crossbar, like you did in those other two constituencies, it is important that people of Kibera have proper options, both in Imran and Mariga. My hope is that they will exercise their right to vote wisely.
Ruth?
Well, one thing I'd want to first speak about Mariga. It would be a sad affair if the Kibra voters vote for a non-resident. Very unfortunate, because this would mean that you're voting for somebody who has no idea, has never interacted with your problems, has no clue about what challenges you're facing, does not even respect the democratic process, has never voted in his life, so does not care about democracy. And for me, that brings out the question that, is he really self-motivated for this seat, or is he going to be a pawn? It would be unfortunate if Mariga becomes the elected member of parliament for Kibra. Why? Because for me, he comes out as a pawn, a political pawn, somebody who will be used, tweaked. 1 minute he's here, the next minute he's pushing an agenda that will not necessarily be for the Kibra voters. Second, the mere fact of the existence of a handshake should not dismantle political parties and systems within the country. Political parties are vehicles, or rather are meant to be vehicles that push the ideals of its members and a particular ideal of the society, which has not been the case in Kenya, because we've seen political parties being molded or formed around tribal leaders and individuals. The ideal political party situation should be that the political parties should push a particular agenda. So it should not shake us or even cause us to get into confusion when Uhuru Kenyatta, the party leader of Jubilee, wakes up and decides to support Mariga, who is the candidate for Jubilee. So it should not shock us. We are panicking for nothing. That is the only thing he would have been expected to do.
All right, David Osiani, very briefly, I'll need you to just give us your closing.
The greatest thing I have loved about being on TV is to make my stand known and to stand by it, to fundamentally let people know what should be right, and what is right must not change with circumstances, regardless of our party. I remember sitting on this bench and repudiating and castigating my very good friend Aisha Juma and saying, listen, political discipline must be upheld. If there are laws that bind you to stay in the party and not promote the other events of the other party, even if it benefits me, who might be ODM allied, my commander deserves to just respect the spirit of the Jubilee Constitution. But that said, we almost make it look like Mariga is a big thing in that contest. I can tell you without equivocation that contest is between Imran and Owalo.
All right,
I can tell you without equivocation.
Really,
but at the end of the day, the people of Kibera have a choice to make. And I want to admonish them. Watu wa Kibera. When you finally go to that day and vote for leadership that will transform your lives. A member of parliament is not a joke. The person must be able to legislate, take to parliament bills that will become laws for the good of the people of Kibra and the entire country.
I think that will be
Do
a
not
great
vote
place
blindly.
to wind up. Thank you very much, David Osiani, Ruth Ambogo, Philip Magal, and Mark Bichachi for joining us this morning to